Welcome everyone. The topic for the day is business process reengineering in crisis management. We will understand the role of reengineering at the time when things are not going great, probably for the organization. Let us visit. What do we understand by the word crisis? Is basically anything which is unplanned events, which causes major grievances, major disturbances, major issues for the organization. So crisis is sudden unplanned event which causes major disturbances to the organization. According to Barton, a crisis is an event that can seriously harm the reputation of the people, the financial condition of an organization, the job security of an employee, and so on and so forth. These are the things that needs to be understood. Thus, it is always moving in a wrong direction, and there is always a slant that comes around it. So that is what is crisis is all about it with respect to the. So nature of crisis, a sudden untoward event. Let's say there is a war which has been going around between two countries, these two countries is not of the country of the business operation of the company altogether, but still they get affected. Why? Because the business operation would have certain of the vendors which might be going through or sourcing material from those affected countries which has been actually under conflict. So that's a sudden impact. Now this is an indirect or even a tangential impact nowadays, since the world is getting globalized and interconnected. Connectivity has been enhanced or increased over a period of time. It impacts. So that is what the nature of crisis is all about. It's a sudden event which you have not foreseen in a different part of the globe. You have it, probably that is what we are looking into. It is absolutely short notice. You have very less time to react. It triggers fear. This is one thing which comes around it. Any sort of uncertainty over the future instills a fear in the psyche of the organization or the employees, thereby which leads to a serious consequences. Definitely, if your party, your company is in the middle of that war, probably you will have a serious consequences. Let us not take a war which might be a man-made situation, right? Let us take up a event which is beyond the control of the human beings. Let us talk about a tornado. Let us talk about a cyclone. Let us talk about an earthquake. Let us talk about a volcano eruption, and so on and so forth. It disrupts which you cannot have any of the things. So there is a lack of knowledge. There is quick response which is needed, but will not be able to do around it. And probably in all times it is unpredictable. This is what we are looking at. So nature of crisis is sudden event, short notice, trigger fears, serious consequences, lack of information, quick response needed, and unpredictable. So physical damage crisis, in which is characterized by the physical damage of the individual, of the society, of the organization. So there is a radicalism which is happening. Probably there is an act of terrorism which is happening, which is detrimental. It causes physical damage. What are they? And natural causes is about floods, earthquake that comes around it, which is beyond the responsibility and the control human beings. Let us talk about the earthquake. Earthquake is sudden release of energy in the earth crust, creates a waves such as a volcanic activity, landslide, mining, nuclear test, and so on and so forth. Similarly, for drought is a period where there is abnormal minimal rainfall, leading to a shortage in the water supply, floods, and overflow of a large amount of water beyond its normal limit. So this is again an anomaly that you cannot control altogether. So non-physical damage, what does it means around it? How does it impact the organization and the society? Let us all understand that organization and the society are comprising of the individuals and the employees their way. So product crisis issue, this type of issue is with the company when the product may fail to generate enough amount of responses, enough amount of followings, enough amount of customers altogether. So there might be certain flaw with the product altogether in the first place. In the anticipation that this product is going to be a mega hit with the consumer did not take place as anticipated. That is what where the assumptions went wrong. Probably as a result, because of the assumption, the product was not up to the requisite quality and upmark. Economic crisis, this type of crisis occurs when an organization experiences a cash problem. This is what we at it. Human resource crisis is eventually at the lower level of the workers. It takes a variety of forms in terms of strikes, in terms of discrimination, in terms of sexual harassment and workplace violence. It happens around the levels of the employee that comes around it. So we need to understand what is the human resource crisis that has been mitigating, or how do mitigate such kind of crisis altogether. So crisis of organizational misdeeds. Now, this is where one particular person or few particular or a group of person can go into deception or mismanagement altogether, the misconduct of the deception. The organization faces crisis of deception because of the fake promises, wrong commitment to the customers, or probably the employees take the customers and the organization for the ride altogether. This is what misconduct is all about. It when management itself is involved in illegal stages of crisis. There are basically three stages. They are pre crisis, acute crisis, and post crisis stage. This is what we are looking at it at the beginning, before the crisis. During the crisis is the acute stage, and after the crisis is over is the post stage where you can do thereby. So pre-crisis stage is the stage where it is up, it has an opportunity to turn negative situation to a positive one. That is what which we are going around it. Here someone is discovers a critical situation and brings to the attention of the superior officer what exactly has been done. Solution: when superior officers know that the condition they want to show outside, they don't want to show it outside the organization. This is the pre-crisis stage where you want to turn anything that is positive, anything that is negative within the company need can be shielded. Such kind of information should not be leaked to the general public because it harms the reputation of the company. So these critical situation can be managed, them can be um, uh, probably cover them up from the exposures, from the media exposure, so forth. The acute crisis stage, this is very much visible to the outside of the organization. It is evident that our company is going through a doldrums that is right now going around it. So we need to understand automatically. Now, in such a situation, you have to take the bull by its horn. You have to basically address the situation as quickly as possible. Take necessary action to fix it up. Probably talk to the media. Talk to make people responsible. Hold the issues as minutely as possible, dissect it, and then go for the thereof. The post-crisis issues, the crisis stages. This is the stage where it is the process recoup after the losses. The event have already bygone. Evaluating what changes needs to be made and how it is to be incorporated. Solutions is all about recouping the losses that the organization can evaluate during the crisis altogether. So, what are the essential consequences of crisis? Now basically it basically eats up into your capital. There is an erosion in the capital, the loss of assets that comes around it, infrastructure destruction, threatened stakeholders, damaged reputation, lack of cash flow, and other things that comes around it. This is what we are looking at it. The consequences of crisis: poor capital, loss of assets, infrastructure destruction, threat to the stakeholder. We are talking about the employee, we are talking about the employer, we are talking about the vendors, we are talking about the shareholders. There are so many stakeholders that get affected altogether. This is what we are looking at it. Their reputation goes, the corporate image goes for a toss, and that is what is having a detrimental effect. There's a lack of cash flow, as I said, in the poor capital, and then there might be many others probably consequences. One of the other thing is the closure of the organization. The organization closes its door altogether and cease to exist. uh, so that is one of the crises that comes around. We'll talk about the financial crisis. Basically, it broadly tells about the situation where the financial assets suddenly lose a large part of their nominal value. That is what we are talking about. It. The large part of the nominal value comes and goes around it. What happens out? How do we mitigate such kind of problem? Look at the problem what the Sri Lankan economy is right now facing: a complete 251 million dollars of debt payment cannot be serviced as a result because there's a lack of foreign exchange out there. What consequences of financial crisis is complementaries in the financial market. It is your leverage that comes around it. It is what we are talking as in when on basis the leverage, the asset liability mismatch, the uncertainty, the hard behavior, the regulatory failures, the contagion that comes around it. It is what we are talking about, the recessionary effect. Now, if you do not have the liquidity ratios being there, if you do not have people to support you, the stakeholders to fund your operations altogether, it doesn't make sense to be there in the first place. These are what are the consequences of financial crisis. Let us understand exactly the crisis management. Basically, it is any major event that threaten to harm the organization. When I say of the organization, look what has been written. It is the stakeholders of the general public. The general public comprises of both the employees and the customer. So the study of crisis management, basically on a large scale industrial and environmental disaster, began on 80s. The purpose was only on three things: prevention, survival, and successful outcome. So if we can prevent any mishaps from happening, if we can survive in case mishaps actually happen, and if we can successfully mitigate and overcome any sort of mishaps, thereby these are the crisis management. So objective is to identify the potential crisis. There are many ways to identify the potential crisis. In fact, it is said all man-made crises, there are indicators which have been always been lurking around in the corner. You just have to pick it up. People more often than not ignore those indicators, and as a result they fall down onto the soup. There are many organizations which I am not naming, where the leading companies in their respective industries cease to exist. There are many companies that is there. They were the number one, be it of the photographic industry, be it about the mobile industry that we're talking about it. You name it, and you can have those brands coming to your mind altogether. Because what happened, they did not identify the potential crisis. They were not well prepared to do so, to understand the risk if they are not innovating, if they are not inventing, and the consequences of the crisis. This is what we are trying to do about it. The analysis of the probability of the crisis objective is to mitigate these things, to identify the potential risks, to be prepared for such kind of crisis, to determine the risk, to understand what are the impact of consequences of the such crisis, to minimize the potential impact of crisis, to analyze the probability of crisis. Let us understand the elements of crisis management. First and foremost thing is your understanding of the event, whether you are responsible, some other companies are responsible, the environment is responsible, the economy is responsible. Understand those factors that has put your company at stake, then probably come up with the crisis management planning. This is where how will you mitigate around it, take everybody into confidence, state your goals around it. And this is what is contingency planning is all about. The contingency planning will tell, in case things goes against your organization, how will you mitigate this thing. Business continuity planning is the next thing, next step about crisis goes around it. We will speak about the inequality in terms of market exposure, in terms of availability of funds, in terms of availability of resources, and so on and so forth. There are so many inequalities that needs to be discussed. We need to have a presence in our social media to clarify the position of the company, to speak to the end consumers, end customer directly, have a sense of a feeling of what actually is happening. The role of apologies is more often than not been understated. But this is what, there is nothing wrong if something goes not in your favor. It is always better to clarify the position, apologize if the mistake is own up your mistake. And that is what we are looking out here. We are speaking about the structural functional system. This is what we are looking for. Now is the time when there are certain structural issues that can be ironed out. There are certain functional issues that can be ironed out. There might be system that might be replaced and a newer system can be in place. The structural functional system needs to be around it. The team is all about the CEOs, the head public relation, the vice president, the safety officer, the company lawyers. Speaking of the steps of communication, now you need to identify with whom you are communicating, which is the aggrieved party that goes around it, and how do you go about it. Develop a holding statement, so a broad statement that needs to be familiarized with it. Assess the crisis situation, finalize and adapt key messages. The key messages that needs to be hammered time and again, saying the sincerity, stating the sincerity of the organization, and post critical analysis that there. Stages for managing crisis is determining the crisis, what went wrong, identify those things, identify the process, identify the system, identify what actually was not going in the favor of the organization. So determining the crisis is what we are looking into it. Obviously, yes, looking at the big picture helps. Gather the relevant teams and set timelines to finish up the job, to complete the job, to ensure that the crisis gets over. So these are the steps that need to be taken care of. Apart from it, what else can you do? You can have a procedural manual which tells me or tells the company as in sort of a financial crisis, in sort of a operational crisis, in sort of a human resource management crisis, what are the steps that needs to be done. There's the standard steps, if possible, can be given. If not, what has happened in the history of the company can be noted down. Seek external expert or the consultant. Speak to the media. This is one of the things that I would always love you to understand, as in fine tuning of the communication. This is what we look about it, the protection of the reputation. Remember, this is all which is very important. To develop the procedure manual, have a consultant in place, have speak to the media. Fine tuning of the communication actually helps to you all the way matters. This is what we are looking forward. With this, we come to an end of this presentation. Thank you for watching this video.